Commissioner Donohue, take your testimony now. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Councilmember Henderson, Chair Barnes. My name is Commissioner Tom Donohue. While I am not representing Advisory Neighborhood Commission 8A in this testimony, I speak as a 13-year resident of the Fairlawn area of Southeast and a newly elected Advisory Neighborhood Commissioner for Single-Member District 8A01. The spirit behind the establishment of ANC commissions, as I understand it, is deeply rooted in the principles of grassroots democracy and community empowerment. It is intended to ensure that residents and stakeholders within a specific neighborhood have a direct and meaningful voice in the decisions that significantly affect their quality of life. ANC commissioners are, first and foremost, neighbors who are directly impacted by the same issues facing their constituents. It logically follows that representation by an individual residing outside of the single-member district would not serve the best interest of the constituents, as they may lack the embedded understanding of local matters critical to the effective representation. Having been elected as an ANC commissioner for 8A01, a role I undertake with profound seriousness, I believe it is unacceptable for an elected official to hold an office while potentially violating the established residency requirements. Prior to the 2022 election, my then commissioner reportedly relocated and notified the Board of Elections of an address change. The address provided to the Board of Elections appears to have been the property owned by a fellow friend and fellow 8A ANC commissioner with a different single-member district. Based on the observations and documented attempts to serve this commissioner, there's a strong indication that this address was utilized as her official residence for the purpose of maintaining her ANC seat, despite evidence suggesting she did not actually reside there. Specifically, on one occasion, a process server in a sworn statement reported no answer at the address and quoted a neighbor leaving an adjacent property saying no one actually lived there, live at resident, most receive mail or conduct business. This raises serious questions about the validity of the commissioner's dedicated or declared residency. I submitted a formal request to the Board of Elections seeking their intervention and review of this potential residency violation. The Board of Elections responded to the ANC chair, acknowledging my request and suggesting the convening of a special meeting to consider a potential vacancy. However, no such meeting was ever called by the ANC. Consecutively, the commissioner in question completed her full term, and there was no mechanism available to address the serious concern. This situation unfortunately resulted in a candidate who resided within the SMD losing the election to an individual whose eligibility was and remains questionable due to the residency issue. Turning to the matter of recall petitions, I urge this committee to consider changes to the current process. In March of 2022, I initiated a petition to recall my ANC commissioner due to the issues directly related to her official duties, specifically the denial of my access to ANC meetings. In her official response to this recall petition, the commissioner included personal attacks, falsely stating, among other things, that he, quote, is a racist and hates Black women and Muslims, end quote. This response did not address the job-related grounds for the recall outlined in my petition. Instead, it resorted to baseless personal attacks aimed at discrediting me. When I objected to the inclusion of these defamatory statements, the Board of Elections informed me that I was required to either accept the commission's verbiage or the recall petition process would be halted. Effectively, I was being compelled to disseminate hateful and false accusations about myself to my neighbors, the majority who are Black, while simultaneously seeking their support for the commissioner's removal. This was a calculated tactic to intimidate me and undermine the recall process. During my communication with the Board of Elections, I inquired whether an elected official could include any defamatory statement in their response, even something as egregious as falsely accusing a voter of murder. The response indicated that if I did not approve the official statement, the petition would disappear, quote, disappear, end quote, effectively silencing the voter's right to seek a recall. The current process creates a perverse incentive for elected officials facing recall to engage in personal attacks and intimidation. Knowing that their response will be printed and circulated by the very voters seeking their removal, they can leverage this platform to tarnish the voters' reputation and discourage community support for the recall. Imagine a white resident approaching their predominantly Black neighbors, seeking signatures for the recall of a Black elected official, while the official's response printed on the petition itself accuses the resident of racism and hate. This is precisely the unattainable and unsafe position I was placed in, ultimately hindering my ability to proceed with the recall effort. To safeguard the integrity of our elections and the rights of voters, I believe two critical changes are necessary. Mandatory Board of Elections review of residency violation claims. The Board of Elections must be empowered and mandated to investigate credible claims of residency violations against ANC commissioners. In my case, the ANC itself refused to address my issue, leaving no avenue for accountability. This could potentially be supported by DC code provisions outlining the qualifications for elected office and the Board of Elections' responsibility in ensuring these qualifications are met. Example Title I, Chapter 10, which deals with elections and ethics. Further research into specific sections regarding candidate qualifications and challenges to candidacy may be relevant. Restrictions on defamatory, irrelevant statements in recall petition response. The Board of Elections should be compelled to not print and disseminate personal attacks or statements unrelated to the official duties that form the basis of the recall petition. This could potentially be supported by DC code provisions related to election integrity, fair election practices, or even general principles of defamatory law, although directly applying defamation law to an official response may be complex. Arguments could be made that forcing a voter to disseminate defamatory statements undermines the fairness and integrity of the recall process. These changes are critical to ensuring the accountability of our elected officials and protecting the rights of voters to engage in the democratic process without fear or baseless personal attacks and intimidation sanctioned by the very body meant to oversee elections. Thank you for your time and consideration in these important matters. Accompanying my testimony will be supporting documentation, and I request it be made available to the public. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your testimony. To clarify that, Mr. Donohue, I wanted to ask you a little more about your testimony. And I guess I'd like to start, if I could, with your point. You want the board to be responsible for reviewing residency violation claims. As far as I know at this point, the board does not have any, it is not in their mission currently that they have that authority. And I wondered if, as a commissioner, you have talked to other commissioners about their concern about residency and residency requirements, and if you also have prepared a letter or would be preparing a letter addressed to the board to get some feedback from the board on this matter. It is true they're an independent agency, but it's also true that they administer this very important service for everyone.
Thank you, Chair. As a new ANC commissioner, I was elected in November and began in January. However, this has been a matter that's been ongoing for several years. In my opinion, in any sort of election, we want to make sure that the candidate who's running and who is residing in that particular location represents the people that they, are supposed to represent. I don't think that this is I think this is a no-brainer in regards to the fact that we want the right people who are eligible to be running. In conversations with the Board of Elections, it seems to be that while I was objecting to this pretty much the entire term of her of the last 2 years, I was I've gone from department to department of DC regulatory entities to try to find the appropriate entity that would be able to address it. Not only do I feel that she misled the Board of Elections prior to actually running, she actually declared using this particular address as her own. to run for that year's, the 2022's election. And again, I do stress the fact that she ran against another candidate who actually did live in and took that right from him because she ultimately won the election. I'm open to working with any entity to see that change be made just in general. I mean, some entity has to take ownership of the roles of our residents and their addresses. And when a properly filed challenge is presented to the Board of Elections with supporting documentation, just not just not an accusation, there needs to be some sort of entity, whether it's the Board of Elections, which I would assume would be appropriate, needs to be able to hear that challenge and move forward with appropriate actions.
All right, and so are you indicating to us that you have made a formal request to the Board of Elections on this matter?
Specifically, I've made multiple inquiries and requests during the whole process of the 2 years that she was running, indicating that something needed to be done. That's what got the letter. So they issued a letter to our ANC chair, which ultimately was not followed in a special, because there's two, to my understanding, there's two mechanisms that could initiate a challenge. One is through their regular mail, the Board of Elections regular mailings. So if they're sending out mailings and it gets rejected and it comes back to them, that's the only way that they can initiate a challenge on behalf of the Board of Elections, or the process that goes through the ANC Commission. However, if you don't have support from your chair or from the commissioners on the commission, and it doesn't move forward and they don't call the meeting, then where does the voter go from there?
All right, and so the Board of Elections indicated to you that they do have the ability to check an address, and you provided them in writing with information, and they indicated to you that they would follow up on that information?
And they did, and they followed it up by sending 2 letters
Okay.
from them to our commission and to instructing them to host a special meeting. But then it now is in the power of our ANC, and they ultimately ignored that
Right.
advice and directive.
All right, did the board give you any understanding or proof that they reached out to that particular address? Because I think in your earlier testimony, you indicated that the address the property was vacant. And I'm trying to understand if anything has been done about that finding or that claim that you are making.
Right. According to a sworn statement from a process server that was trying to service or process service on the commissioner, he had talked to neighbors who had said that they believe that nobody was living there. I do know that the property is owned by a fellow ANC commissioner and another family member that is on the same commission as the commissioner serves. So we made 7 attempts to reach out to her at that address. Obviously, throughout this entire time, she knew that we were trying to reach her. We even, the process server even went during an ANC meeting where you would think that they would be, at home on their Zoom meeting. And again, without any of a success of being able to have her service. The indications from the process servers and sworn statements basically say that everyone around the people that they had talked to had not seen her living there or coming and going in any fashion.
All right, well, I appreciate that. Would like to, any documentation that you have of information that you shared with the board and what the board's response was, it would be very helpful to the committee. One of the things I suspect we are focusing on, and that is the procedures. The Board of Elections operates through regulations, And it could very well be it's high time that they have some laws in place so that we can be more uniform in how we make applications. So I'm thankful that you are bringing these issues to us today as
I
a
sit
group.
before you today as a commissioner as a direct result of these two. So it's my goal that, through my commission, that I help bring change to this process so that other voters and citizens don't have to go through what I did. So I appreciate any assistance you can offer.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. And your second point is well taken, and the board will be with us and in a little time, I want to say a few hours. I don't want to scare them to death, but we won't take that long. But we'll hear from the board officer soon.
And I can't tell you the effect that the words that were printed, that I was forced to accept to have printed on the petition, have affected me and my business. Those sort of claims, unfounded, never given an example of one instance of her claims, has affected me greatly, profoundly. As a white person, white male living in a predominantly Black community, you can imagine what sort of effect that has had on. Luckily, the constituents voted me into office, and where I can continue to make changes in the process. So I appreciate your time.
All right, thank you very much for that.